Hello, I'm Sho Baraka, and welcome to George Fox Talks. And I have a question for you. Can rich people and poor people exist in the same space? Good morning, George Fox community and friends. I am Sho Baraka. I am author, artist, and activist, especially for this conversation today. I am here with Dr. Steffanie Altenbern, who is an assistant professor of social work here at the university. How are you doing on this day?
Great. I'm fired up to be here.
Anytime I do interviews, I hope that I'm the most fashionable person. But today I have lost. I've conceded. And, it's all right. The watch and the glasses, the whole fit is just, as the young kids say, your drip is nice.
This is why.
Is this the first time somebody said drip on a George Fox podcast?
No, this is good for me because I have 4 daughters. My oldest is 13 and does middle school very well. And I rely on her a lot to teach me these things.
Absolutely.
So I have never heard that from her. So now I get to go home and teach her that. And I get to go say that to her and see if she knows it. And that's a mom win.
There you go.
I needed that.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What made you get into social work?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I grew up in a very small town in Michigan, graduated with 50 kids in my high school. It was a very agricultural community. And I did what most 18-year-olds do well and thought I had the world in the palm of my hand. And I said, I'm going to move to the mountains, move to Colorado. I'm going to snowboard. My life is going to be great. So I had moved to this university, gone to college, and they had 10 majors. And I had my heart set on the fact that I was going to be an elementary education major. And I had already gone into, I graduated with some credit. So I started the program right away. And I got there and 2 classes in, I went to my advisor. I was like, I don't really want to be a teacher. And she's like, well, you just moved a really long way, didn't have a car. She's like, you're going to be taking these classes that really don't matter. So I was like, all right, God, what do I do? So I ended up back at the school in my hometown and had just happened to pick this major of social work. They maybe had the best ice cream social or something. I don't really know what drew me there. But once I started learning about that, I was like, oh man, this is going to be fantastic. I did my first internship with a ministry that recruited church parents to adopt or Christian parents to adopt out of the foster care system. Their whole goal was to empty the pool of foster care.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is going to be great. I'm going to reunite happy families and make dreams come true. And social work is this fabulous career. And then I kid you not, God was he was just laughing, right? Because my very first job was at the Denver Rescue Mission. And again, I grew up in a small town, drugs, substance abuse, these things didn't exist in my world. I had no idea. And I remember my very first day, my supervisor had come to me and handed me some manila folders. This was before computer files. And it was all right, go fix them. And I was like, fix them?
Yeah.
What? I'm not trained for this. And so that was my first encounter working with homelessness, working with poverty, inner city. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about other people, and it was humbling. It's now been 12, 13 years, and I haven't really looked back.
Excellent.
So here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are doing all the social work things.
When we talk about social work, most of us think about, or a large part of the population thinks about casework. But there's another aspect, the macro side of social work. Could you explain to us what that is and why you're so passionate about the macro?
I cannot tell you how excited I am to be able to expose this side of social work because you were so right. I always ask students when they're coming in, kind of, what do you want to do? What brought you here? And most of them, they want to go be clinical therapists. They want to do the micro work, which is fantastic. They're that is so needed.
Yeah.
But what really sets social workers apart is the fact that they're trained in the whole spectrum, right?
Yeah.
We have micro, we have meso, we have macro. And some of the best work, the most effective work can happen at the meso and macro. And so I tell my students, yes, you want to go out and be a caseworker or a therapist, that's fantastic, but you also need to understand and contribute and advocate for the macro piece.
Yeah.
And as most people do, I spent the early years of my career in that micro world. I was a caseworker, I was doing the things, And I very quickly realized, especially for my clients, the low income, the homeless, like the voiceless population, if I'm honest, if they have a fighting chance to get ahead and thrive in this middle class society, we have got to change our system. And so what does that mean, right? Like, what do we do as macro social workers? We see problems. It's justice, right? It's equality. It's all of those pieces. We find those gaps. We see the problems and we say, how can we make this better? And that's where program development comes into play. That's where relationships come into play, which if we're in middle class and wealth, relationships are like everything, right? You talk to people that get into Yale or Harvard, they got in because they knew somebody. Like maybe they had decent grades, right? Probably, and a lot of money. But they got in because they know somebody. And
then once they leave, those relationships
get them a job. Right. And and that is fantastic. What's ironic though, Sho, is those relationships, those in poverty, the houseless population, like those relationships, that means everything to them.
Yeah.
So we have all of these relationships, which we need those micro people skills to have those relationships, but how we can use those relationships is how we make the world a better place, as cliche as that is. But so question here, macro social work, what is it, right? We are advocating, we are lobbying for change at the state capitol. We are finding out what city council has on their agenda because we need green space. We need sidewalks in parts of your community that where they don't have cars. Then kids are walking to school. We need like safe equipment on the playground so kids actually have somewhere they can hang out. We need bus lines in communities. We need bus lines that operate outside of 8 to 5. We need bus lines that can take people to their swing shift. We need advocacy for a minimum wage. We need advocacy to not cut the food stamp program or to recognize what else is going to be cut if we do expand something like Medicaid. Fantastic, but we have to look at the whole picture, right? That money's got to come from somewhere. Let's educate ourselves and do that. We need an economic understanding for how poverty is even determined. Like who creates the poverty line? What do we do about it with inflation? Because not everything is keeping up, right? There's a daycare shortage. How are people going to work if they get a raise? So it's all of those things, looking at community level issues and saying, this isn't working for our most vulnerable populations. How do we change it?
Dr. King has a quote where he talks about the Good Samaritan in the scriptures, and he says, it's a great story to preach. And oftentimes as society, we use that. And he says, that's great. But at some point, we have to ask, why does so much bad happen on the Jericho road? And I do think that's a great kind of like distinction between the micro. We need people who care for the folks who are beaten down on this Jericho road. But at some point, the macro is, well, there's a lot of crime or there's a lot of injustice that happens on this road. How could you give us an example maybe of how to address an issue like homelessness or poverty on a macro level?
Yeah, because this is an easy area that you can lose hope. You can look at it and you can say, the homeless isn't going to go away. I remember when I worked in Denver out of college, they had like the road to end homelessness. And it was like this, it was a really, really grand plan. Like, how can we not have any homeless? Right. And it was like this 10-year plan. And so I just look at something like that and I'm like, the thing here though that's missing is when we look at like causes of poverty, for example, it's very easy when we see somebody on the side of the streets panhandling and we say, go get a job.
Get a job, you bum. Yeah.
Right.
You look able-bodied.
Go get a job.
Get a job.
Yeah. But what we don't realize in our very middle-class mindset, mostly privileged mindset, if I'm being totally candid here, you need a computer to apply for a job. Okay. Let's assume somebody makes it to the library to apply for that job. Okay. They sit down, somebody's helping them. Oh, now you need an address.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you're lucky enough to have an address that you get your mail, like Portland Rescue Mission, the Gospel Mission. They do that well. You can have that as an address. Okay. So now you've gotten through all of that. Let's say now you have to show up for an interview. What kind of interview clothes?
Yeah.
Maybe you're resourced enough. You can go find an organization in town who's going to help with that. Then you got to find a shower. Then you have to find transportation. And now if you're lucky enough to make it through all of those barriers to get hired, now you need an ID to be able to start the job. I need to be able to show up on time. Like there are so many barriers that we do not recognize.
Absolutely.
There's resources for all of that, right? But how many times do we like get home after a long day of work and we're like, I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
I should work out. I should make a healthy meal. I don't want to do that. So now we are also expecting people who like their emotional energy, like their emotional capacity, it is like gone. So in order to totally eliminate these issues, we have to look at how can we make this system set up better. So I'm a huge, huge fan of Ruby Payne, Bridges Out of Poverty. She basically looks at like the paradigms of socioeconomic status. And there are essentially hidden rules of every socioeconomic status. So, we show up, what's your favorite sport?
Right now, soccer.
Soccer.
Yes.
Love that. Love that.
Yes.
So we like World Cup, right?
Absolutely.
We look at the game of soccer, all of the rules. Okay. And that's what you know. So now what if I were to say, okay, now you need to go show up with your soccer rules and you need to go play basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're going to lose, you're going to get fouled, probably injured.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to end well.
I'm falling out real quick.
Yeah.
Because I'm kicking folks and tripping folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that was a good one. So, but that's what we expect folks in poverty to do.
Yeah.
We have a middle class world
Absolutely.
that a lot of our change agents, those in power, come from middle class and they've got some knowledge with wealth. I'm not speaking for all of them. Some of them have maybe come out of poverty, but they're not quite understanding the hidden rules of poverty and what's important. So now we're expecting folks in poverty to show up to this middle class world, this 8 to 5 mentality. And it's a real struggle because they're still playing the game of soccer.
Can I ask you this question? How do we as churches even think about our programs and the way we do fellowship in considering people who are on the margins?
Yeah. Yeah. I love
because
this.
I've been in churches that plant, they have great dreams of we're planning for this particular community, et cetera, but they bring the very thing that you just communicated, these philosophies, these ideas from the middle class world, educated world to these blighted communities. And they're like, we're going to change and transform this community. But even the way that they communicate, the sermons may be, Greek and Hebrew references, not to say that people in these communities don't understand, are not intellectuals, but they may not understand, certain postures and how you're communicating. What can we do to not just the social work, but even the pre-work of engaging our communities better from church philosophies and methods?
Love that. So this is something, so many social work organizations have started off like 501c3s. They've started off by incredibly well-intentioned people. Like they just want to do good.
Absolutely.
And we wake up and we put our best drip on, right? And we go about our day doing the best that we can.
I think that's 3 times now.
Yeah.
So keep it count.
So
we're gonna drink communion every time we say it. This guy.
Is that a controversial word? Should I not say
No,
that?
no, it's not at all.
All right. Well, these are things I need to know.
There are some that I can give you that are controversial, but that's definitely
okay. So we're
Drip
safe
is
here.
very safe.
But my point being with that, like we wake up and we put our best foot forward to the best of our abilities that we know how. We don't often understand all of the context. So what I would say to churches, right? And like no disclaimer, like I do not have the gift of being a pastor. So I don't want to say pastors are doing this wrong by any means.
Pastors are doing this wrong. Go ahead.
But I think that we need to do a better job understanding the context. For example, I worked for an organization. I actually was on staff at a church in the past, and they had a wonderful community program where they provided school supplies, right? And every year it was like this huge event. The whole community would come out. It was like a great, hey, we love you. You're loved here. Show up. Like we want to feed you, make this like a happy event. Well, the part of that they eventually realized was there was another organization that had a grant funding to provide backpacks and school supplies every year. So now once this rather large church started stepping in and providing all of that, the numbers for the organization providing this started to decrease.
Right.
Which then when you do your grant reporting, then you lose that funding.
Absolutely.
Right. And we see this overseas all the time. We think that people need rice or shoes or grain.
Entrepreneurial kind of hijacking so that people who are producing don't sell because they're getting things for free or whatnot. Yeah.
Yep. And hey, you need, there was a documentary I was watching where like they were providing shoes, a bunch of shoes, right? Well, now you're putting the shoe maker
Yeah.
out of business. And so then when that shoe organization in the US pulls out, then you're leaving people
It's a very tricky
high and dry.
situation.
And that's international, but that happens all the time here. We need to do a better job of putting our own assumptions aside for what's going to be helpful and go into our communities and present ourselves as servants and learners without our own agenda.
Yeah.
We need to say, what do you need? We are here to serve you. And sometimes they don't know. And I love the idea of microloans. Like that's been a really successful thing. How can we go in and pour infrastructure into sustaining that community?
Yeah.
Making sure that it is set up that when we aren't around anymore,
Right.
that they can sustain itself. That to me is kingdom work, right?
Absolutely.
So,
All right. So I'm gonna read this quote to you, and I don't even know if I have a question. I just love this quote, and
and I get to share my thoughts.
I just want you to share your thoughts
Yeah.
because I think it's right on the nose. All right. So Christopher J.H. Wright. Christopher J.H. Wright, who wrote Old Testament Ethics for the People of God, he has this quote in his book. He says, "The Old Testament asserts, as all modern analysis demonstrate, that only a tiny fraction of poverty is accidental. Mostly, people are made poor by the actions of others, directly or indirectly. Poverty is caused. And the primary cause is the exploitation of others by those whose own selfish interests are served by keeping others poor."
I've never felt so seen in my profession with that quote. Like that quote breaks so many of the social norms of what we think about poverty.
Yeah.
And like that fires me up. So when I do my lectures, when I teach people about the causes of poverty, they often have no idea. Because again, it goes those individual behaviors. Okay. Well, like I hope we all realize like we are like one bad decision.
Absolutely.
we are sinners. We are so not perfect. Our bad decisions sometimes they may not leave us homeless. They may not leave us totally at rock bottom for years to come, for generations to come. So when we think about poverty, right, we think about causes of poverty and individual behaviors. That is one piece. One of the pieces we also have as a cause of poverty is exploitation.
Absolutely.
Okay, you look at neighborhoods, like you picture yourself, I don't know, you're in Atlanta right now, okay? Yep. Let's say you uproot, move here to Newburgh, Portland, great. Love to have you here, okay? You're driving around, married, kids, right? You've got a family to think about.
Absolutely.
So you're like, what areas of town do I want to live in? So you start driving around and then you kind of get a feel for like what areas may not be safe to raise kids in, right? That maybe aren't as desired. And we just did this. We just moved here a year and a half ago, got 4 kids. I got a lot to think about. And I'm going through and the areas of town that I see pawn shops, used car dealerships, liquor store, title loans, those places. You're not going to go to Lake Oswego, which is a community here, and you're not going to see a pawn shop.
You're not.
As a matter of fact, there is a Goodwill boutique.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so when we think about exploitation, we think about, and then there's not even bus lines.
Absolutely.
So somebody owes their neighbor.
We don't want you poor people coming to our community.
Right. Pretty much. Like you are stuck there with the resources that are there. You don't have
Steffanie, you better slow down because you're going to get me to a level of ignorance that is.
I mean, you're hitting all the buttons, Sho. So like I'm
let me calm back down. Okay.
So let me like not make this a 15-minute answer, right? Because this is like, oh man, this is good stuff. So when we think about exploitation, we have to change policies. We have to not allow places to show up and exploit vulnerable individuals. Yeah. Because if they need money, that title loan place is going to look real appealing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like you try to give up pizza for 30 days and now every single pizza, even if it's like Hawaiian pizza, looks really, really appealing when you just want that slice of pizza. And so we have to look at exploitation. Like we have to look at our political and economic structures that speak into this. And again, this is all like Ruby Payne, Bridges Out of Poverty, huge pitch for it. Fascinating on the research continuum for causes of poverty because it is so much more than individual behaviors. And that exploitation piece is absolutely a piece of that.
It's fun. I find it very interesting because we can go to, say, this mythical city or part of a community that you're talking about, and we can see prostitutions and pimps working. And if that person walked into a church, we would be quick to say, we appreciate you coming here, but your vocation and your lifestyle must change in order to be a part of this fellowship. And we would rightfully, in some ways, challenge that person to a life of godliness and to see the dignity in themselves and the dignity of others. However, if somebody who was into predatory lending walked into our church and was like, hey, I want a fellowship here, we'd be like, hey, man,
You're welcome here.
you're welcome here.
Yeah.
And we would probably make them an elder
Well, and
because of the way that they manage their money.
right. And it's a business opportunity, and who knows
Yeah.
that
And
they
they're
might bring in more
giving.
to the church, right?
And
That
both people are exploiting folks in a way that is detrimental to the community and not producing flourishing. But one's legal and one isn't.
well, and that's the thing too. Like some of these sins are more obvious,
Right.
right? We can look at a pastor who might struggle with gluttony,
Right.
right? But that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
And we might look at somebody who is behind closed doors, had multiple affairs, and we don't know about that. But if that comes out, they still might be accepted there because we love them and they've been with the church for how many years, right? But the minute somebody relapses or is an addict or gets a DUI or something, they kind of get shunned out.
Absolutely.
So you bring up good points.
So
It's good. We're going there. We're going there.
Churches often create, I guess you could say, mediating institutions. What would you say to churches who are thinking like, man, I want to serve. I want to be a bridge, if you will. Not only to the churches, but also to the Christian who is thinking about social work. What are some of the things that, if you can give like a 3-minute, like, here's what I would challenge you to think through. What would be that thing?
Well, I think it's twofold. Number one, so the first part of your question, churches, go spend time with people that make you uncomfortable. Go hang out. Go a day in the life, right, of somebody that makes you extremely uncomfortable, because that's when you really get to see that people are human.
Yeah.
I think about that with the houses all the time. Like I don't like the word homeless. I don't like the word houseless. They're people. Like they are homeless people. Like let's just take out homeless. Like let's just look at them as people. And they're actually pretty intelligent in their own ways. I have learned so much from my clients and I've been so humbled, but I would never get there if I didn't place myself in a position willing to learn, right?
So what's another term that you will like?
They're just people.
Just say
Like
But
what?
how do we describe that person? Like,
Right.
it's like,
Like maybe under-resourced?
Got you. Okay.
Right? Which, because I think like often I can be under-resourced in some ways.
I'm under resourced. We talked about microloans. If you want to go ahead and give me a microloan, my name is Show. You can email me at. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. But I just think for churches, right? We think that we want to really do things well.
Yeah.
And it's hard for churches, especially the bigger they are. It's hard for them to truly think in an unbiased way because a lot of it is like, how can we also get our name out there to increase people, to be able like to lead people to Christ? That is all really, really wonderful. But I think we have to start looking back at like, what was the church like in Acts, right? Like, this is like, I'm sorry, but like the fog machines, like, is it necessary? Like, I just, it's controversial,
Yes, it's
right? Like,
necessary.
am I
Absolutely
allowed
necessary.
to say
We
these
got to put on a
things?
show. What?
Man, I
Jesus
might
put on
be
a
a bit of a
show.
job here. I don't know. But I just think if we're being candid and honest and we
Yeah.
really want to look at like, what do we need to do for kingdom work? Like we need to go meet people where they are. And we need to stop expecting them to show up on our rules. And we all do it, not just churches. We think about that in relationships. Like I think about like moving here, trying to meet new friends. Like, does my husband like the other person? Do my kids like it? Like, I mean, we just have all of these factors that we want to take into consideration. But if we can just get rid of our own bias and recognize that like they're people and they want connection too, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, let me interrupt with another question. Do you find that a lot of churches like to do the work for an applause, kind of like the when helping hurts, versus actually truly integrating people into the life of their community? And if they are interested in integrating these individuals, these people into the life of the church, what kind of things must they consider?
I think that you are asking if those people who might make churches uncomfortable were to come in and like, if we're looking at it from an equality justice standpoint here, like how can we all be on equal playing fields? What that might look like.
So I'll just make it real personal.
Okay. Please do.
I go to a wonderful church, and we do great work. We're in the middle of a gentrifying community.
Okay.
We were there before it was gentrified, but there's a market that has just exploded and changed the demographic of the community. There are housing projects around our church. They're contracted to be there for another 10 years.
Okay.
Our church is an educated, middle-class, diverse church. It's very difficult to see the people who attend our church, or it's very difficult to see the folks who live in these projects, these low-income housing, to really see them having real equity in our church. And when I say real equity, I mean being leaders in our church, elders. As much as I believe in the heart posture of what we're trying to do, and I'm like, yeah, the reality is I know there are barriers. That doesn't mean, they're not welcomed. I see ourselves, we do all kinds of outreach, we serve that community. But there can be a chance that many churches find comfort in just doing the work and saying, hey, we're here to serve you, but we're not allowing you to serve us.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So when I have worked with those in poverty and the stories and that I've witnessed, that I've heard of people being successful in moving out of poverty. Okay. I promise I'm going somewhere with this. A lot of times it has been because they have what we call a middle-class ally. So I don't like the term mentor-mentee. Like that's got a hierarchy to it that still says we're above you. I don't like that. I like allies, right? So when I worked with a program that we paired up for somebody that was trying to transition out of poverty. They had 3 allies that were of middle class or wealth, and they were teaching them the ways. Right? Kind of like God, like, I love you too much to leave you this way. Like if you're uncomfortable, that's good because you're growing and you're dependent on me. I think the same thing with those that we're trying to teach something, right? So I think about like your church, your community sounds like fantastic work. How do you get those folks to where you can all build and grow together? You're willing to teach them just as you're letting them teach you.
Absolutely.
And it becomes this partnership and this ally. Like here's what I know about this. Here's what I know about this community. You have a lot more experience. Tell me about that. I get clients all the time. Like you're young and you're white. Yes. Both of those things. I mean, I call myself young, right? For the most part, but you're right. I have not experienced what you have experienced as a Hispanic or as an African-American or as a Pacific Islander. But teach me, tell me more. I want to hear about those experiences because that's part of what makes you human. And that's a beautiful thing. And you have a lot of gifts and a lot of assets you bring to the table that we can use, but I want you to teach me. And when you can present yourself in that way, like that builds a relationship.
Amen.
Right? And then you're going to learn from each other. And then next thing you know, hey, your church board is talking about something. Hey, I met so-and-so, like they actually have some knowledge on this. Like, let's get them at the table. Right? Some of the nonprofits I've worked for, 2 of them in particular, one of their board of directors bylaws was that they had to have at least 50% of the board had to be graduated clients of the program.
That's excellent.
And I thought that was so beautiful. Like you're talking about diversity, right? Like what better way than socioeconomic diversity in a program that is serving the lower end of the socioeconomic status? I think that's great.
It takes a lot of humility.
So much humility.
However, Dr. Altenbern, there are people out there who don't want my help.
Yeah.
They don't want our help. What do we do about these people who don't want our services?
Yeah. Well, it's very
on a micro and a macro level.
I know.
What do we do?
I know. And I find this with clients all the time. They don't want to get clean. They don't want to go to the shelter because they can't have a hot UA stay at the shelter. Like there are stipulations, right? And we just show up and we love them. Similar to how when we don't want to change our ways and God says like, hey, you need to. And we fight that for potentially our whole lives, depending on what it is. Same kind of thing. Like the client is the expert of their own story. Well, we are the expert of our story. And that is up to us on how we want to change. There will always be people out there that want to stay homeless. Yeah. They are totally content sleeping in a tent. They are totally content panhandling for money. And that's their prerogative, right? Like we are not going to totally change all of their ways. We cannot control how people are. But I think if we can recognize like what are some infrastructures that we can put in place, right? Safe needle dispensing boxes, safe spaces that they can sleep in, like safe parking lots. This housing crisis, there are now like safe parking lots that people can go sleep in if they want to do that.
Have you seen that be done in a successful way where you kind of create spaces for, I guess you can say, because oftentimes there are areas where people say, I don't want panhandling in this particular part of city. So if we can move it to a particular place, have you seen that, some cities have done this successfully and it's worked, or is it just all like, hey, we're still trying to figure it out?
I know. And I think that's kind of the magic answer is that people are trying to figure that out. I haven't been in Portland long, a year and a half or so. And so still just trying to get used to what that looks like. I know there's a lot more frustration. There's a lot more, people have a lot of ideas for how we could solve all of these problems, but I think it's really just a moving target. And I pray for our legislators and change makers that are trying to spearhead these decisions, because there are so many dynamics, so many political dynamics that play into this. And how can we do this well? And no matter what they say, the public is frustrated, right?
Absolutely.
It's one way or the other.
Somebody's going to be frustrated.
Absolutely. Nobody's ever going to be happy. And so I really don't know if there's a magic answer to that, but I think that if we can have some kind of understanding, I know that's helped me as a social worker. And I'm thankful I can share that with my students. We don't have all the answers, but if we're willing to learn from the people who are in those situations that want to get out, maybe our solutions might be a little bit more effective from the get-go. Right? They may not want extra food delivery boxes, but what they really want, they really want transportation. That is like, that might be their main goal. They can't get ahead if we don't have solid transportation. We have to ask them.
In light of that last question, very simple, very, very, very simple question. This is probably the easiest question of the interview. Can poor people and rich people who are under-resourced and people who have a lot, can they exist in the same
space? That's an easy question.
Very easy. I was expecting you to have a book written on this. Already.
I don't know. Yes.
Okay.
They can. Are they going to exist with a lot of tension and a lot of disagreement and conflict? Probably yes.
All right. How do we deal with the conflict and tension? Both as ideally, there is a manual, we call it the scriptures, that helps us to deal with conflict and tension, but not every municipality operates. I mean, zero of them operate under this guideline. So how do you, as a social worker who's concerned with the macro, how do you, you have a private practice. If I said, hey, I'm building this city, it's called New Jerusalem, and I want people who are under-resourced and people who are wealthy to exist in this space, and I want to create, live, work, play, worship environment for all people to be a part of it, and I need you and your insight to help me build this. And I have this foreseeable idea of these are the tension, these are the different conflicts we'll deal with. What are some things that you would tell me? Like, hey, consider this. This is probably how you resolve that. This, and X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I used to train, again, these very well-intentioned, essentially church volunteers that wanted to do good. And I would take them through this day-long training curriculum, basically like educating them on what it's like to be in poverty. So sometimes it included things like a poverty simulation, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with that model.
I remember Oprah did something like that, and I was like, this is... God bless your heart, Oprah. But
well, the poverty simulations, I know they've been like Salvation Army. So they're, like fairly legit in my experiences, right? I did not grow up in that mindset. And it was only like a 2-hour type of activity. And it was the most stressful 2 hours of my life. And I've worked with folks for many, many years. But when those folks that are higher resourced, right, when we can educate them on what it's like, I'm not saying that we're going to like be free of conflict. It's just, we do that among everybody, right? That you're not going to get rid of that. But I think if we can do our part in trying to help people understand what it's like to be on the other side, we can hopefully instill some compassion We see some empathy, and we see a real opportunity for people to form connections and people to form relationships. Beyond that, sometimes you got to trust the Holy Spirit as far as what's going to happen. But I think that piece is so critical. How can we make sure that we are all in this shared space, understanding what it's like to be on that other side?
Yeah.
What can we learn from somebody else, right? Are we taking our own agenda? Are we trying to fix them? I tell my students all the time, don't go should on your clients. You should do this. You should do that.
Oh my gosh. My brother, we have a debate about this all the time. He says, stop shitting on people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. I mean, I have 4 kids, right? Like I do this with my kids all the time, right? Yeah. I'm sure I do it with my clients, but I say, don't go shit on them. You don't have the answer to their life, right? Like your role as a social worker, yes, you've got some training, some clinical skills, diagnosing, treatment planning, all of that. You're doing that. But you are also, they're navigating their own treatment plan. So if they don't want to go to rehab, they don't need to go to rehab.
Yeah.
And you're going to love them. And for as long as you're working with them, you're going to let them know that is always an option. But if they are not ready to do that, they're not ready to do that.
A lot of my tension with activist work is, or I'll just say activist work, not to demoral or bring any kind of minimize the work that you do. So activist work is knowing that on this side of the great by and by, we won't create a utopia. Yeah. We won't reproduce Eden, right? But I often like to talk about the Garden of Gethsemane, where there's a second garden where Jesus is there and he's showing us what it looks like to live sacrificially, to live with all authority, yet to give that power for the benefit of other people in the midst of tension, betrayal, etc. How much of that mindset should social workers and activists have when they're going into difficult situations where they know, look, I hope that we can change systems. I hope that we can create micro and macro change, meso change, all of that. However, there's a chance that none of this may actually capitulate. And so, but yet God is still good.
Yeah.
So how much of that on the front of your head do you need as a social worker versus the back?
I think a lot. I tell my students, if you're coming into this field, well, I tell them 2 things. If you're coming in this field to make good money, you came to the wrong field. But you're doing kingdom work, right? Not that other majors aren't doing that. Work. Yeah. Okay. Actually, ironically, I went to school in my undergrad. They built a brand new building and they put social work on the 2nd floor. And the School of Business was on the 1st floor, so that we had to walk through the School of Business to get to our floor in hopes that we would meet good connections or
just not make it up to the 2nd floor. It's just you know what?
I think I'm good. But I think, and I also tell them, if you're coming in this for success stories, this is also I could probably count on 2 hands, success stories, clients truly getting housed or getting clean and sober. I'm not really living for that, right? I feel called in this profession, and I know many others do. I've had many students that have also shared this. They want to go out there and they want to be able to plant seeds. Yeah. And whether that's to clients, whether that's to communities, that's what we're about. We recognize we may, on this side of where we are now, we're not going to see the promised land, Absolutely. Right? We hope and pray, if we could just wake up, things would be much better. But number 1 is job security. Number 2, we just know that we're going to go out there and we're going to fight another day and try to represent the people that need voices, or we're going to go learn something. Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of a chaotic roller coaster. I enjoy that. I'm here for that, right? I don't really thrive in the mundane. I thrive in chaos. Amen. And that's very easy for social workers to be. And you don't really this isn't something that hey, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'll get a master's degree in social work. Yeah, probably not. I mean, you rule yourself out pretty quick if that's kind of what you're doing. But there's a lot of seeds to plant in our profession. A lot.
Amen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with Dr. Steffanie Altenbern, and we're going to go through some rapid fire questions. Okay. So I have about 5 questions I'm going to ask you. You're going to give me your personal and then another answer in relation to your work, your vocation. Okay? Ready? All right. So I'm putting you in isolation for a year, right? You're taking care of yourself, but you can have 1 book. What is that book that you're reading?
Okay. The Help.
The Help. Okay.
Or
Quick.
oh man, I'm gonna cheat.
You can only have one, so you give me another one. I'm gonna make you pick.
Okay, well, if I'm gonna go into isolation, somebody can surprise me and give me either The Help or Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers.
Okay, so in regards to your work, because we
Yeah.
want you to still be up on social work, you got to stay sharp.
So when I come out of isolation.
Yeah, so when you come out of that thing,
Okay.
you know, hair all crazy. What is the book in regards to your work?
Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence.
Okay. These are also good resources for you guys. All right, so you can only eat one meal.
Oh,
It has to be the same thing over and over and over again. What is that meal you're eating?
brunch.
Brunch. But see, that's so broad. So is it like, what type of brunch? Is it like French toast? Is it, what's on the plate? You
I'm a
have an
millennial. We live for brunch. I'm a white millennial. We live for
This
brunch.
is like 11 C's with you just everything. Okay, I'll let you have it.
Thank
You have one album that you're listening to. It's on repeat. What is that album other than my albums?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Right? I know. Am I still in isolation?
Yes, you haven't left yet. You're still there.
It's gonna sound like real boring. Okay.
Okay.
Probably some random album of yoga music.
Oh, okay.
Like,
So you're going to be doing a whole lot of yoga.
yes,
Okay.
I am.
Do you have, in regards to your work, is there a song around justice or protests that you say like, ooh, this song, I'm listening to this song
Yes,
all year
yes.
long, or an album?
Yeah, there is a song out there by Casting Crowns. Oh, and it kind of like raps. I am like,
The big time protest group, Casting Crowns. Yes.
I know, right? No, what is that song? I am so bad with music. Like,
And there's a rap artist on there, you saying? All right.
yeah,
I'm wondering if it's
they
KB
basically talk about a lot of these things that we've talked, and I don't usually like Casting Crowns. Please do not put that on.
that's going on there. That's definitely staying on there.
I don't like I don't really do.
By KB and Casting Crowns.
Yeah. See, that's
What's it called?
It's called Start Right Here.
That
I
song.
figured it was the KB. Yeah, I figured it was
That
of
song.
KB. Much love to KB. Great guy.
Yes, that song, because it talks about so many of these things that we have
Yeah.
talked about today and showing up. But I like Casting Crowns in that song. So
Can I ask you, are you a big fan of Casting Crowns?
yes, front row every concert.
All right. So, one film that you have to watch all over. It's just all year. It's just like, oh, I'm watching this film over and over.
Barbie.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna give you a sentence to explain why.
One sentence.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. This is like a Pictionary or something, huh? One sentence to explain Barbie. Fighting social norms in a biblical way.
Oh, okay. So we have a lot of biblical truths, a lot of subtle biblical truths in Barbie. Who knew?
As a mother of 4 girls that believes in gender roles, yes.
So, women are little girls out there. If you want Barbies, just say, like, look, it's out here teaching us biblical truths. And so your parents can't fight against that. All right, so a film about social work or social justice that you would recommend. Your favorite film.
Yeah.
This is it.
They're
Aaron Brockovich. I don't know.
yeah, I know. I'm like, so like Barbie, when I watched that on Sunday, that was literally the first movie in like probably a decade that I had watched. So I'm gonna go with it's kind of this old, like it's a little outdated, but principles are still the same. It's called Nickel and Dimed. There's also a book about it.
Huh. I don't
It's
think I'm
basically
familiar.
about a journey, somebody trying to move out of poverty. It's a good,
Nickel and dime.
yeah,
All right.
it's a good one.
All right. Last one. What is a self-care practice that you, I mean, you mentioned yoga.
I do.
But let's just say
Yeah.
yoga's out there. You can't do yoga. What's another self-care practice that you will do for this year? And this is the only one that you can do. So you actually can't do yoga. So you're just listening to yoga music for no reason.
While I'm on my Peloton, that's fine.
Is it? Are you?
Yeah,
gonna be
definitely Peloton.
All right.
Peloton.
All right.
I have to have that in isolation.
Okay.
If you're not going to give me a yoga instructor,
Yeah.
you need to give me a Peloton.
What is something that, like, if you had some students and they were like, hey, I just need a self-care practice. I don't really have any healthy habits. What would you recommend for them to do as they're engaging this chaotic world?
Yeah. They need to find something that brings them joy that's not work related.
Okay.
So that could be
Playing with dolls, Barbies,
yeah.
because it's very biblical.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Although don't play with the Barbies too much. So I won't spoil the movie, but you'll see what happens.
And eat brunch.
Brunch is absolutely self-care.
Eat brunch, play with Barbies, and stop shitting on people.
Yeah.
That is the moral of today's interview, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please give a round of applause behind your cameras or whatever you are, your screens, for Dr. Steffanie Altenbern, ladies and gentlemen.
This video podcast is a production of George Fox Digital. To find more material like this, you can subscribe to George Fox Talks on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Our team really appreciates your feedback in the form of likes, comments, and reviews, and we'd really love to hear what you think. To sign up for our weekly email list and to keep up to date with the latest episodes and publications, you can check us out on the web at georgefox.edu/talks. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.